welcome back to Movin' Right Along, a Muppet movie podcast brought to you by toughpigs.com. It's the podcast where we watch The Great Muppet Caper 2 minutes at a time and talk about it a lot. I'm your host, Anthony Strand.
And I'm your other host, Ryan Rowe.
And joining us today, we're very excited to have a first-time guest. Tell the listeners who you are, first-time guest.
My name is Leah Papazoglou. I am the wife of Peter Papazoglou, so I am a Muppet-in-law. Like Sam the Eagle, I think you are all a bunch of weirdos. But like Kermit, I'm the weirdest of them all because I surround myself with you all voluntarily. And I'm very honored to be here in a sort of amateur role, impersonating someone who knows more than they are actually equipped to talk about.
Here's the thing, though. We are all amateurs. Like we didn't make the Great Muppet Caper.
That's true.
But we are so thrilled to have you.
We should also mention you've written at least one thing for the Tough Pigs website.
I think I did. I think I sort of made a written cameo there. And
you wrote a review of one of the Studio DC specials on the Disney Channel.
I did.
You did it so the rest of us didn't have to.
It's true. I watched it so that others could be spared.
Right. Well, I was going to say, I actually reviewed the other one. So the entire Tough Pigs review staff for Studio DC Almost Live is on this episode.
Anthony, this is like meeting up with another Marine and talking about which tour of duty you did or something. So,
right. I did the one where Miley Cyrus or Selena Gomez possibly tries to tell jokes with Fozzie. Okay. Oh. I don't even remember. Okay. Anyways. All right. So today we are talking about Muppets 35 and 36 of The Great Muppet Caper.
You actually said Muppets 35 and 36, but that's great.
I did not.
You did, but please continue.
Okay. Today we are looking at minutes 35 and 36 of The Great Muppet Caper, in which our heroes Neville and Dorcas talk about the weather, hear a grunting sound outside, and see a pig climbing up the outside of their house. Finally, in a stunning twist, that pig sneaks into their upstairs and makes a loud crash. So that's what we have here. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that the heroes of these minutes are Neville and Dorcas.
Absolutely. And you just made it sound pretty exciting, actually.
Well,
you know, I was actually gratified that, as I was mentioning earlier, I don't know much about the technical wizardry of the Muppets and how they're executed. So I felt a little bit more equipped to approach this scene because it is so human-centric. They pull off the rare feat of actually upstaging Miss Piggy, which is a hard thing to do. But they are so captivating in their utter blandness in these couple of minutes, I have to say.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. Well, and I guess we should say who they are. We haven't really introduced them yet. Dorcas is played by Joan Sanderson, who actually, I think most people don't, most Muppet fans watching Great Muppet Caper don't know really who Joan Sanderson is. She actually had a very long career, mostly in television.
She did a lot of theater also.
A lot of theater. She did a lot of TV from the 50s into the 90s. She was a regular on 2 hit sitcoms. She was one of the teachers on Please, Sir, which did 55 episodes.
That is such a British title.
Such a British title. Did 55 episodes in the late 60s, early 70s. And then she was on another hit show called Me and My Girl, which did 52
really wanted it. Anthony, I wanted it to be called Can I Have Some More as the sequel to Please, Sir. That's just a real missed opportunity there.
It is. That one was about a widowed dad, and she was the mother-in-law / grandmother of the lead characters. So she was around. I mean, I think British audiences certainly would recognize her.
She also appeared in a British TV adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, in which I think she did the voice over a performance of a puppet. So this is not her only experience with puppets.
Well, and what's weird is I found out that was actually also 1985. Which is the same year as the American Alice in Wonderland that 2 other actors in this movie appeared in.
Oh, yeah.
So we keep bringing up 1985 TV adaptations of Alice in Wonderland for some reason.
Well, I do because that's one of my favorite things of my childhood. That other one.
Your life is defined by the 1985 Alice in Wonderland.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So many show business people that I know because of that thing.
I don't think that we've talked about the fact that you actually mailed me a DVD copy so I could show it to my daughter.
We have not talked about that on the air, no.
I now need to enjoy this special because I feel that I must have been in some sort of containment chamber during 1985 because I have no recollection of this. at all.
It's a 2-episode adaptation. The first half is Alice in Wonderland. The second half is Alice Through the Looking Glass. And it's just full of mostly B and C level celebrity cameos.
I mean, Ringo Starr plays the Mock Turtle. So
yeah, he might be one of the most famous people in it, actually.
Yeah. Anyways, so that's Joan Sanderson in a nutshell. Neville, of course, is John Cleese, which when people talk about this scene, they say, oh, the scene with John Cleese, like Joan Sanderson doesn't get mentioned by name because most people don't know her by name, I think. John Cleese is one of the Monty Python guys. I think most of our listeners probably know that. He was on The Muppet Show. He was memorably a psychiatrist on an episode of Cheers. He's in A Fish Called Wanda. You know, he's John Cleese. I feel like most of our listeners know who he is.
He created and starred in Fawlty Towers.
That's right. He, in addition to many, many other things. And here he does maybe the most low-key performance of his career. And it is true. It is a delight. Ryan, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, he also, among his other credits, he voiced the ape named Ape in the George of the Jungle movie in the 90s. And that puppet was built by the Jim Henson Creature Shop. So,
And actually, did either of you guys ever read the book, what's the coffee table book about the Jim Henson Creature Shop?
No Strings Attached?
No Strings Attached. In the jacket for that book, it says, find out the stories behind your favorite Henson creatures, including the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and George of the Jungle, which makes it sound like Brendan Fraser is a Henson creature.
Yeah, the Creature Shop did a great job on Brendan Fraser.
And that has stuck with me for 20
He's very
years
lifelike.
since I read that book. So yeah, John Cleese's best known role, an ape named Ape. So let's talk about him here. He's really good. What do you guys think about old John Cleese?
You know, it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned him being, it's an understated performance, because I do think of him in Fawlty Towers and other performances where he's made of Gumby. Where he's sort of got an elastic body, and he's in this sort of very physicalized kind of comedy. And here it's really just a masterclass. The two of them are a masterclass in underreacting, and it's so captivating, as I said before, that you can be transfixed by how little they're giving you to respond to and how little they're responding to each other. And what I said earlier, that I practiced strict discipline in not watching the couple of minutes beforehand or even the seconds beforehand. And I think the first thing she says is it's been terribly disappointing. And you just sort of know that she's talking about the weather.
Yeah.
You don't have to, because it's so quintessentially British. But I also just found that I said to Peter after watching it, this is 2 minutes of the dialectic between id and superego just being dramatized. You have a pig climbing up the outside of a house. And if there's any Muppet or figure in the world who can just encapsulate id more than Miss Piggy, I've yet to meet him or her. And then you have these two folks who just, can't seem to get activated about anything and are so deeply repressed. That it just, all the comedy is in the juxtaposition. I mean, they really are the heroes of the scene, but I think there's so much to be mined, and just the fact that the camera keeps going back, the lighting is different between the two. The music is different every time they switch between the two shots. And it's just phenomenally entertaining.
I never noticed about the music, but
that's a really good point about the music. Yeah, it adds a lot to it. It's such a great contrast when you go from Piggy on the outside of the house with this sort of like sneaking around danger type music to this very elegant sounding sort of classical music.
But I have to say, the other thing that really jumped out at me is there's this like quintessential British tragedy in his inability to be activated. So it's funny because he seems distracted, and I can't tell what he's actually thinking about. And she says at some point, like, "Am I boring you?" And so he seems deeply bored. But when all of a sudden this opportunity for like intense excitement presents itself, he doesn't get activated. He can't get excited about it. And I thought, oh, it's so sad. He's been practicing, repression for such a long time that even given the opportunity to get really excited that there is a pig on the outside of his house, he's just sort of unable to summon a response to it. Like he's just habitually bland.
Although I do love that his response to "Am I boring you?" includes, "You'd have to go a long way to find a chap who was more stimulated than me."
Exactly.
So good.
And then it's sort of like British chuckle. Like, I mean, there's a sort of repression in his indigestion. Like he has this sort of very British belch in the first couple of seconds. And then he's sort of like working out some food in his teeth, but in like the most discreet and sort of genteel way. Like it's, and then at one point, she hears a sound and she suddenly seems a bit, I mean, it's Piggy, and she seems a bit startled and she says, "What was that?" And he says, "Oh no, dear, I was just making a point," as if to reassure her. Like, no, don't get alarmed. I'm just making a point. There's nothing to be concerned about here.
Right. There's nothing else happening outside of our little...
Right.
And also he doesn't want the conversation to escalate in any way.
Right.
Right. Well, and isn't that when he calls her "my little armada"? That might be later.
What an unusual pet name that is.
Yeah, it's great though. It makes me laugh every time.
I rewatched it repeatedly with captions on YouTube, which are unreliable at best, to try to figure out what he says. And I think that was what I deduced was Armada, which, she's so placid that the idea of her being, a forceful presence is, again, just part of my question for you all is, do you know how much of that scene was ad-libbed?
I don't. Ryan, you were looking over the earlier draft of the script, so you might know more.
That draft from July 22nd, 1980, a lot of it is there. It's pretty much all there. There are some extra lines and little moments of their conversation that got cut, which is for the better. Like, they both had a lot more dialogue, which wasn't really needed. They just kind of go on and on, especially later, like when he's talking about going to the store to buy something. If he were bored, he talks about going to buy a necktie and stuff like that. That's not in this, but the general idea of all of it is there. There is an exchange that they keep coming back to where she's offering him food and he turns it down, or he accepts it, or he turns it down. So it starts where she says peas and he says please, and then she says wine. He says fine.
No.
And then she says duck and he says yuck. When she says tea, he says not for me. And then later it cuts back to them and she says spinach and he says finished.
No. See, that's cute. It seems like something else.
It's too funny, is what it is. It's too much of a joke.
Yeah, it's a children's book. It's a children's book.
Yeah, joke here is that they're not being funny. That's what makes it so funny.
Right. Which, and like when I was a kid, even like as a young teenager, I didn't think this was good. I thought this was like the worst part of the movie.
I didn't appreciate it for a long time.
Oh, it was such a slowdown. I was like, we've lost all the momentum. Get back to Piggy. Like, again, I didn't care about people underreacting. I wanted to keep watching her climb the side of the... And, again, I was sort of like, who are these people? I was sort of, the Muppets featured pretty prominently in my childhood, and that my parents really liked the Muppet Show, and we did go see all the movies, and I remember listening to the soundtrack and all that. And I did not understand the presence of humans in Muppet in really any Muppet media. They just seemed distracting to me. I think the guest was probably my least favorite part of the Muppet Show, where, to me, it was like, get back to the puppets. So I do remember that distinctly as a child, being sort of annoyed by this scene. And I agree with you, the sort of rhyming, the sort of like rhyming volley going back and forth there it seems tonally off from at least the 2 minutes that I watched. It seems like that's part of a whole different scene.
Yeah, it would have been wrong for this. That thing about the being annoyed by the human characters, this is only tangentially related, but it reminds me when I was a little kid. You know the scene in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory where everyone's going crazy for the golden tickets, and there's that lady whose husband has been kidnapped, and the captors want her supply of Wonka bars.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I used to think that was that was in there accidentally from a different movie
Well,
because it was so tonally different, and I was just like, "What is this? This is the wrong movie. Get back to Willy Wonka."
But I think that's the joke, right?
Yes, of
That,
course. I realize
all of a
that
sudden
later.
you're in this cop show or whatever.
Right. It's just showing how desperate people are for Wonka bars. But it was a similar thing where I was like, get back to the real thing.
I can't believe that's the bit that you didn't think was part of Willy Wonka and not the fever dream in the tunnel, because that was absolutely the part where I was like, so I just had a dissociative episode and I guess I should start watching the movie again.
Yes, but Charlie and Willy Wonka are on screen for that.
Yeah,
so.
Gene Wilder performs it.
Right.
That's fair.
Well, and even as long as I don't want to stick on Willy Wonka for too long, but the one where Tim Brooke Taylor has the computer that he wants it to tell him where to find the golden ticket.
That was the other one, yeah.
That one feels a little closer tonally. I don't know. It's funnier,
Right, it's lighter.
Even as a kid, I recognized that Tim Brooke Taylor was a silly person, I think, like as soon as you see him.
Right, he's playing more of a caricature.
Right.
He also, it's one of those things where it's like, if he's not funny, someone needs to tell his face. Like it's, that it would sort of be unfair to come into the world with a face like that and be not funny.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Interestingly, it's funny that you mentioned that, because now I'm starting to think that this podcast is where all the threads of the universe come together, and space-time is understood in its enterity, because earlier today, I thought of that scene, and I promise this will be my last tangent. I'm lying. There's a new book out now on how woefully unprepared NASA was to actually achieve the mission of a man on the moon in 10 years and everything that they did in order to make that happen in the 60s. And they talked about how you used to feed sort of bits of physical script into computers. And it reminded me that was the most confusing bit of that movie to me, when he would feed, because he feeds messages into the machine and the machine spits out other messages. Yeah. And I was like, what is this weird form of communication? There was no idea, there was no sense of like you could type something in, or that computers were running code that you weren't consistently having to feed them in physical pieces of paper. So yeah, thanks for bringing that twice in my life today.
I am now telling the computer that I will gladly share with it the grand prize.
I'm now telling the computer exactly what it can do with a lifetime supply of chocolate.
And Tim Brooke Taylor was on The Goodies, which was kind of like one of these Monty Python-esque shows, which brings us back to John Cleese.
Which I think I interrupted you earlier, Anthony. So
well
you
done.
Remember what you were going to say.
That was a bravura segue, I must say.
Yes. Oh, thank you. We talked on the Muppet Movie about how Steve Martin and especially Mel Brooks kind of take over and become the star of that movie for a couple of minutes. And this is like the most extreme version of that, I think. Like those guys kind of do that, in the sense that they take over. This becomes a movie about John Cleese and Joan Sanders for these,
they're
for
playing
these
their
two,
own scene.
Leah, you mentioned Piggy a couple of times. Piggy literally has a line in this, in these 2 minutes, and no other Muppets appear anywhere.
It is like a little bit of a one act, like it could be a sort of like standalone. You imagine it as like a freshman theater piece of like a couple that has, never had passion or spark. And they're sitting there having a depressing dinner, and she, is sort of feeding him bits of conversation. And again, I can't get over how distracted he seems and yet unexcited. So I'm like, what is in his mind? Because it can't be something that's really energizing him very much, but he's certainly not particularly, present in any meaningful way. And it's maybe it's just sort of like the effect of age, that I remember watching it as a child and being annoyed, and watching it repeatedly preparing for this conversation. And again, this sort of like this sadness, this tristesse is sort of emerging from how vacant he is. I was like, he's not present in his own life. Like there's something of like I said, a sort of very quiet British tragedy about his. Now, I don't know what happens in the subsequent minutes, because again, I was a very disciplined student. But that he, a pig climbs up the outside of his house and he just doesn't have the will to respond. And his wife isn't really listening to him say, I think she asks for clarification a bit later. Like, did you say a pig? And when he clarifies, it's sort of like, oh yeah, oh good. I just wanted to make sure that I heard you correctly. But like neither of them has a particular action item coming out of that. It's like, just noted,
Right. Well, and I love the way that he absentmindedly says, pig. Like, it's not like he says, yes, a pig. It's just, pig climbing up the house or whatever. So good.
I'm so glad that you called out a bit about her career as well, Joan Sanderson, because I was unfamiliar with her. I'm guessing she's probably better known to British audiences, but it would be so easy for a lesser performer to be really sort of outclassed by John Cleese in a scene like this, or to sort of have her just be the straight man to his straight. Like it's quite a thing to have two straight men who can sort of be equally funny and equally straight at the same time. And she's just they're meeting each other at the entirety of these 2 minutes, which I thought, again, was just, my hat was really off to her.
Yeah, she matches him for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I agree with all of that. She, by the way, is about 20 years older than him.
Huh.
I don't know if you knew that.
I think they made his hair
like, he's
more
a little
gray than it actually was at this time.
Right. I mean, he's only 42 years old
right.
in this. This is like before Monty Python's Meaning of Life, for example.
Yeah.
You know, where he plays a wide variety of ages. But see, she was born in 1912, so she's 27 years older than him.
Huh.
I hadn't situated this movie at this point in his career. I thought, I guess my sense for not having sort of looked at a timeline is that it felt like an emeritus role. Like, John Cleese, who's obviously very good at being very funny and very British, and like, we'll put him in this. I didn't realize that this was sort of, smack in the middle of a lot of other really well-known work that he, it's
only 2 years removed from Fawlty Towers is what I was going to say. But
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were going to say something about James Bond movies, Leah?
No. What was I?
I don't know. You said he was doing J, and then I cut you off.
Oh, no, sorry. Just that this was like, very much in the midst of a whole other body of work that's well known of his, and not at all a sort of, let's pull him out of retirement, which again, there's no reason to suspect that was the case, except that I think I did deduce from her age and the way that they sort of aged him up that this would have been, later in his career. Although I suppose if I'd done the math, he'd be like 109 now. So,
right. That's the thing. This movie's 38 years old. Wow.
Yeah.
And John Cleese was just a baby back then.
I don't find, I 38 years ago, and the knowledge that John Cleese was 42, I just turned 40 this year. And whenever I hear the age of some celebrity, I think, what have I done with my life? Like, I look at John Cleese and I'm like, he was 42? Really?
Well, I remember I had an existential crisis watching the Philadelphia Story a couple of years ago, because Jimmy Stewart, Mike, says 26? That. Well, yeah, he says that he's 31, and Jimmy Stewart was really 31, and that's how old I was watching it. And I'm just thinking, man, he's so much like more. He's wearing a suit at home, like.
But do you want to wear a suit at home?
He's not a farmer, right? Like he's come on. Is he gonna wear? Is he gonna wear brown shoes after 6 or something? I mean, come on, this is America.
Right, there you go.
I don't want to wear a suit.
Oh, classic. But no, so yeah, I totally can relate to that, because it was like Jimmy Stewart should be my dad. He's not the same age as me,
So on that note of celebrity ages, because again, I lied about no tangents, the cover of the New York Times Magazine is about Madonna at 60. So I really ricochet between, oh my gosh, this person was only 2 years older than I am when they had already achieved an enormous body of work and pulled off 2 extraordinary minutes of footage. And then how can Madonna possibly be 60? Because that means that I'm, 1,000,009. And, so it's
right.
In short, kids, don't Google celebrity ages. You won't feel good about anything.
Right. There you go. So I guess we should talk a little bit about Piggy. Leah talked about her briefly. But it's throughout these minutes, we get these cutaways to Piggy, and she's just going about her business. Like, she's not doing anything especially funny here, I don't think. She's just climbing up the side of the house.
It's funny in the way, I think it's not that funny to us. I think if you showed this to a person who doesn't think about the Muppets every day, they would probably find the image of her scooting up the wall, the outside wall of the house, to be pretty funny.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I never know, this is something that will emerge when Peter and I are watching, some Muppet media of some kind, and he'll sort of call out like, oh, this is a bit where like it was when I first learned to like throw the Muppet, which was probably on like date 5 or something. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, I think that term might be Peter's.
Is that being?
I don't know of any other Muppet fans who use the phrase "throw the Muppet."
It's a leitmotif that Peter has established, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, he actually talked about it when he was on the show.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. So now we just sound redundant.
It's a good one, though.
But, I always sort of wonder if part of what's happening is a little bit of like, technological show off. Like I remember thinking that with the bike riding in with Piggy and Kermit on the bikes, that they're, it's beautiful and lovely, but I am also wondering, like, are they showing that they can, it's part of what I'm supposed to be entranced by, the idea of like, how did they make that happen? Is some of it just like the, special effects aspects of it? I remember again, being entertained by a pig climbing up the side of it. There's not a great deal of physical comedy in it, but it was sort of like I think because she's just so dysregulated, like of course she's going to climb up the side of a house. Do you know what I mean? Like there was something that I found really appealing about Piggy as a child.
Yeah.
Like you would expect Piggy to do something like that.
Yeah, like I said, like she's just all id. Like she contains no ability to like self-restrict.
By the way, I was thinking after you said that, I think you could make a case for Animal as also being a Muppet of pure id.
Probably even more so than you could actually write an interesting. Because somewhere out there's a freshman who's dying to write a term paper on Piggy and Animal as like gendered expression of pure id identity or something that
Yeah.
Well, and Cookie Monster too, I think.
And they're all Frank Oz characters.
Frank Oz, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it's just kind of a thing with him.
Somebody should write that essay.
That's true. Is he a particularly id-driven guy? The time that I saw him in person, he seemed actually rather reserved. I know nothing about him at all, so I'm sure that someone could school me quite easily on my wrongness there. But I don't know. Perhaps it would be really interesting if. Really energetic and sort of animated Muppet performers played more sedate, sort of, ego and super ego type Muppets. And, someone who's fairly reserved gets an opportunity to sort of like get his yayas by being Cookie Monster, which I think
there
must
is an element of it to that. Yeah, I think so.
Must be very gratifying to just go to town on a telephone or something, that's like,
yeah, right. Sure. I guess we should. I haven't said actually what Piggy's one line in this is, which is next time they want stunts, they get a double. She looks to the camera and says that. Puppets do have stunt doubles. Like this isn't the regular Piggy puppet doing the climbing, right? It's like a special puppet with legs that work.
There might even be more than one Piggy. There is probably more than one Piggy puppet in this scene. Because I would imagine that's the regular hand puppet when it cuts to the close-up and she speaks the line. And then it's probably some kind of poser or like a sort of doll version. Because when there's this shot where she's just dangling off the top of the roof, I feel like they may have just like attached that puppet's hands to the roof and then just kind of let her dangle in the wind. So that would be a different kind of puppet.
So I did not know that Muppets had stunt doubles. And here's my question. Are they always the same? Do they build sort of custom dolls custom puppet for this is what she's going to do in this scene? Or is there like, this is the Piggy puppet and this is the stunt Piggy that gets deployed repeatedly? Or is it just sort of ad hoc?
I think it probably depends on what they need the puppets to do in a given scene. And it's probably more common in the movies for them to do unusual things like this.
Yeah, I wanted to know if there was like an Angry Eyes Piggy somewhere that I could go like find in a warehouse. Like, is it always the same Angry Eyes Piggy?
I would guess that the Angry Eyes were just switched out for that scene. I would guess.
In that case, I think they just took off her other eyes and put on.
They just like built eyes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Keep looking. You might find it. You might find the Holy Grail. I don't know.
But then there are like, there's just the hand puppet that they use that when they're shooting Piggy from the waist up, and then when they need to show her whole body, there's a different puppet that has legs and all that kind of stuff.
Got it.
Right. Well, I think that discussion of Piggy kind of brings us down to the end of this. Before we go, do you have any final thoughts on these minutes? Leah, I'll start with you.
I don't. It is interesting that these particular 2 minutes are sort of relatively Muppet free, and that the bit of business that's happening outside is pretty exciting. But like I said, that excitement is entirely lost on the folks inside. And I look forward, like I said, to some psych major writing about the fundamental sadness of, a British habitual repression and the inability to become excited even when stimulus presents itself.
Awesome. All right, Ryan, how are you going to follow that up?
Bring it down, right? Like, you knew I could find a way to find deep sadness in a Muppet movie, right?
Oh, sure, of course. Yeah, that's what we were counting on.
You're like, we need a real gloomy one. How about Leah?
Aw.
No, it's perfect for these minutes. But well, I was just gonna mention another thing from the July 22nd draft, which is that it actually, the character's name, the husband character's name is Greville rather than Neville. I have never heard the name Greville before.
Really?
So I guess I'm glad they changed it to Neville, because I don't like the sound of Greville.
No, and Neville is so British.
It sounds very British. But it also notes in the stage directions that he looks like John Cleese.
Oh, there you go.
They were planning, they were thinking of him from the beginning, obviously.
I think they probably thought they could get him. I mean, he was on the Muppet Show.
Yeah,
he's an established friend, right?
Right. They probably had a relationship with him by this point. And then also, I just happened to notice this as I'm kind of skimming through the clip. We were just talking about different Piggy puppets. When she climbs in the window and then falls at the top of the stairs, there's a shot where we see her sitting at the top of the stairs, looking down the stairs to see if they heard the noise. And we see her whole body there, which means Frank Oz must be under the floor, which means this is probably a set that they built especially for this shot, so he could, stick his arm up through the floor to puppeteer Piggy just for this shot. So just one of these little things where they didn't even have to include this shot at all, or they could have done it an easier way, but presumably that's what they did and it works.
Huh. Fascinating.
Semi-fascinating.
So, that's probably a more accurate way to describe it. Yes, that is indeed semi-fascinating. And with that semi-fascinating tidbit, we are all done for today. So, Leo, we usually have guests talk about a little bit about, like, do you remember the first time you saw this particular movie? And where would you rank it among the Muppet movies?
I don't remember when I saw it initially. I would guess my parents didn't take me to see it in the theater, unless it was re-released or something, because I would have been, 2? Where would I rank it? And I'm going to sound, very basic right now, but it's so hard for me to have anything dislodge the Muppet movie. But if I could have selected any other 2 minutes from a movie, it would have been Charles Grodin. And so this, they're sort of neck and neck for me. But I'd say it's more of it's an also ran in my mind. I wonder if that makes me part of the minority. I mean, it's better than Muppet Treasure Island. Like, I don't, I never saw the one where Fozzie finds where Gonzo finds out, like, his home planet or whatever. So
Muppets from Space. Yeah.
Muppets from Space. I'm actually looking forward to covering those ones on the show, because Ryan definitely likes Muppet Treasure Island more than I do. And I definitely like Muppets from Space more than he does.
Interesting.
So I think it's gonna be like as contentious as Ryan and I ever get, which is not very. I think that's what's going to happen.
I will listen to those episodes, because I'll tell you, the two of you in that regard remind me a little bit about when my uncles would argue during the really dark years for the Detroit Red Wings about, like, who was the better among really awful players. Like, I mean, their seasons were just awful. But when they finally went to the Stanley Cup, it was like, you're entitled to be a fan. So the fact that, like, I'm fair weather, like, I'll pop in for the high points, the Muppet movie, Great Muppet Caper. But you guys are doing some deep cuts there. You got some, B-sides, C-sides, D-sides there. Well done. And I will listen just to hear you argue about, like, which one is less worse.
I can't wait. I'm so
late
glad
90s
we have
Muppet movies are exactly like the Detroit Red Wings. So that's a good comparison.
It's true, they are. So, and speaking of hockey, No, that's dumb. I'm not doing that. I have nothing. All right. So that
Sorry for taking it to a sports place, guys.
No, sports are adequate. I don't mind them. That does bring us down to the end. In the meantime, please check out Tough Pigs on our website, on Facebook, on Twitter. We're all over the place. You can follow me on Twitter at Zeppo Marxist. You can follow Ryan at me, Ryan Rowe. Leo, where can our listeners find you, if anywhere?
You can follow me following you all good gents if you look over my shoulder at my computer, because I have no Twitter presence at all. So I should really, get with the times. It seems like that's happening again, Twitter, and it seems like this whole social media thing isn't going anywhere. But I am on Instagram, so, check out pictures of my avocado toast.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. And listeners, if you're so inclined, give us a positive review on iTunes and tell all of your friends to listen to the show. And be sure to join us again next week for another Neville and Dorcas filled episode of Moving Right Along. Goodbye.
See you later.
Thanks, everybody.